The rejection. Elijah Daniels leaned against the sleek body of his silver electric car, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored navy suit. The prestigious Magnolia Ridge Country Club loomed in front of him, its ivy-covered facade and white pillars gleaming under the morning sun. It was a vision of exclusivity and wealth, an institution that symbolized a world Elijah had spent his entire life trying to access. Today, he intended to take the next step. Elijah had been raised in the heart of Chicago, in a neighborhood where hope often felt like a luxury. His mother, a nurse working double shifts, and his father, a mechanic, had instilled in him the value of hard work. "No one's going to hand you a seat at the table, Eli," his father had said countless times. "You've got to build the table yourself." Elijah had taken that advice to heart. By 35, Elijah was the CEO of a thriving logistics company, Daniels Global Solutions. He had transformed a small delivery startup into a multinational corporation. He employed thousands, funded scholarships for underprivileged youth, and had even been featured on the cover of Entrepreneur Weekly. Yet, as he stepped through the polished glass doors of Magnolia Ridge, he felt an unease that no amount of success could entirely erase. The receptionist smiled at him as he approached the marble-top desk. "Good morning. How can I assist you today?" "Good morning," Elijah said warmly. "I'm here for my appointment with Mr. Langston regarding membership." The receptionist's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Of course, Mr. Daniels. Please have a seat in the lounge. Mr. Langston will be with you shortly." Elijah nodded and moved to a leather armchair near a window overlooking the pristine golf course. As he waited, he thought of the countless business deals he closed in rooms just like this. But this wasn't about business. Joining Magnolia Ridge was about legacy, about proving that he belonged in spaces once deemed off-limits to men like him. After a few minutes, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a sharp gray suit approached. "Mr. Daniels," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Charles Langston, the club president. Let's step into my office." Elijah followed Charles down a corridor lined with framed photographs of past members. Every face in those pictures was white, a silent testament to the club's history. As they entered the office, Elijah couldn't help but notice the gleaming golf trophies on the shelves and the oil painting of a hunting scene behind the desk. It was a room designed to intimidate. Charles gestured to a chair. "Please, have a seat." Elijah settled in and handed over his membership application, meticulously prepared with letters of recommendation from prominent business figures. Charles scanned the documents briefly, his expression unreadable. "You have quite an impressive resume, Mr. Daniels," Charles said finally. "Your contributions to the community are commendable." "Thank you," Elijah replied, keeping his tone steady. "I believe Magnolia Ridge aligns with my values of excellence and community engagement." Charles nodded slowly, then placed the papers on his desk. "While your accomplishments are admirable, Magnolia Ridge is a very exclusive club. We have a limited number of memberships available each year, and the selection process is highly competitive." Elijah's stomach tightened. He had anticipated resistance, but hoped his achievements would speak for themselves. "I understand that, Mr. Langston," he said carefully, "but I believe I bring a unique perspective and a strong commitment to the values this club represents." Charles's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Unfortunately, Mr. Daniels, the board has decided not to extend a membership offer to you at this time." The words hit Elijah like a physical blow. He kept his expression neutral, refusing to give Charles the satisfaction of seeing his disappointment. "May I ask why?" he said, his voice calm. Charles hesitated, his fingers steepled. "It's a matter of maintaining the culture and traditions of Magnolia Ridge," he said finally. Elijah understood the unspoken message. His presence didn't fit their traditions. He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Langston." Charles shook his hand briefly. "Best of luck to you, Mr. Daniels." As Elijah left the office, his jaw clenched tightly. The rejection wasn't just a personal slight. It was a reminder of the systemic barriers he had fought against his entire life. Walking back to his car, he replayed the conversation in his mind. Each word from Charles felt like a nail in the coffin of his dream, belong in spaces like Magnolia Ridge. Sitting in the driver's seat, Elijah gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He thought of his late father's words, "Build your own table." Taking a deep breath, he resolved not to let this rejection define him. Instead, it would fuel his next move. As he pulled out of the parking lot, a plan began to form in his mind. Elijah didn't just want to prove Charles Langston wrong. He wanted to challenge the very foundation of what clubs like Magnolia Ridge represented. Whatever it took, he was ready. Rising resolve. Elijah Daniels sat in the solitude of his home office, the warm amber light from the desk lamp illuminating the dark wood and leather of the room. A steaming cup of coffee sat untouched beside him, and his laptop screen glowed with a stark white document titled Project Legacy. The words from Charles Langston still echoed in his mind, sharp and cutting. Maintaining the culture and traditions of Magnolia Ridge. He had replayed those words countless times since the rejection. Each repetition stoked a fire inside him, a determination that overshadowed the sting of disappointment. Elijah had faced prejudice before, but something about this encounter struck a deeper chord. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the way it had been delivered, so casually, so confidently, as if Elijah didn't even deserve an explanation. For days, Elijah had considered his next move. Should he let this go? Should he simply move on, as he'd done with countless other slights? But the more he thought about it, the clearer his path became. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about every barrier that had ever been placed in front of someone like him. Elijah opened the notebook he had started filling the night after the rejection. The first page bore a simple phrase in bold letters: "Dream big, build bigger." Below it, he had outlined an audacious plan, one that would require courage, vision, and resources. Phase 1. The vision. Elijah's plan wasn't just to create a club. It was to create a haven, a space where talent, achievement, and character were the only criteria for entry. He envisioned a place where people of all backgrounds could come together, not only to network, but to inspire and uplift one another. This wasn't just about golf or exclusivity. It was about building a new tradition that challenged the outdated norms of places like Magnolia Ridge. He decided to name the project Unity Heights. The name resonated deeply with him, embodying the values of inclusion and progress he wanted to champion. This wouldn't be just a country club. It would be a statement. Phase 2. Building allies. Elijah knew he couldn't do this alone. Unity Heights would require more than money. It would need people who believed in its mission. Over the next several weeks, he began reaching out to his network. Business leaders, philanthropists, athletes, and artists. Anyone who shared his vision of breaking down barriers. One of his first calls was to Camille Harrington, a renowned architect who had designed award-winning community centers and cultural spaces. Camille was a trailblazer in her own right, having faced discrimination in the male-dominated world of architecture. "Elijah," she said after he explained his vision, "this is bold. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you. Count me in." Next, Elijah reached out to Marcus Bell, a retired NBA player known for his activism. Marcus had grown up in the same rough neighborhood as Elijah, and the two had bonded years ago over their shared experiences. When Elijah told him about Unity Heights, Marcus's response was immediate. "This is exactly what the world needs right now," Marcus said. "Let's make it happen." With Camille and Marcus on board, Elijah's confidence grew. Over the following weeks, he assembled a team of like-minded individuals who brought not only expertise but passion to the project. Each new ally added momentum, turning Elijah's dream into a collective mission. Phase 3. The location. Elijah's next challenge was finding the perfect location. He wanted Unity Heights to stand as a beacon of progress, visible to all. After weeks of scouting, he found an abandoned estate on the outskirts of the city. Once a luxurious retreat for wealthy industrialists, It had fallen into disrepair over the decades. But Elijah saw its potential. The sprawling grounds could be transformed into a state-of-the-art golf course, while the Grand Manor could house the clubhouse and community spaces. Negotiating the purchase was no small feat. The estate was owned by a group of investors who had let it languish while hoping for a lucrative buyout. Elijah's offer was fair but firm. When the deal finally closed, he stood on the overgrown lawn, imagining what Unity Heights would become. "This is it," he said to Camille, who stood beside him with a clipboard already sketching designs. "This is where the new tradition begins." Phase 4. Breaking ground. With the location secured, Elijah and his team wasted no time. Camille's designs for the clubhouse were modern yet welcoming, blending glass, wood, and steel to create a structure that felt open and inclusive. The golf course, designed by a celebrated course architect Marcus had introduced, was tailored to be challenging yet accessible to players of all skill levels. Construction began with a groundbreaking ceremony attended by local leaders, media, and members of the community. Elijah stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with a mixture of pride and determination. "Unity Heights is more than a club," he said. "It's a movement, a place where everyone who dreams big and works hard can find a home. Today, we're not just breaking ground on a building. We're breaking down barriers." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Elijah placed the first shovel into the dirt, he felt a wave of emotion. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was the beginning of something far greater. Phase 5. The community impact. As construction progressed, Elijah ensured that Unity Heights would have a meaningful impact on the local community. He hired local contractors and suppliers, creating jobs and boosting the economy. He also launched a scholarship program to train underprivileged youth in golf and business, ensuring that the club's mission extended beyond its walls. News of Unity Heights spread quickly, drawing attention from national media. Articles hailed Elijah as a visionary, while social media buzzed with excitement about the project. Some called it a challenge to the outdated exclusivity of clubs like Magnolia Ridge. Others saw it as a symbol of hope in a divided world. Back at Magnolia Ridge, the mood was far less celebratory. Charles Langston sat in his office, reading an article about Unity Heights with a scowl. The club's board members had already expressed concern about their dwindling membership and finances. Now, with Unity Heights gaining momentum, they'd worried about losing their status as the city's premier club. "This is a direct attack on us," Charles muttered, tossing the magazine onto his desk. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that Elijah Daniels was about to prove him very, very wrong. Elijah watched the progress of Unity Heights with a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The walls of the clubhouse rose, the golf course began to take shape, and the dream he had envisioned late at night in his notebook was becoming a reality. One evening, as he stood on the grounds watching the sunset, Marcus joined him. "You know," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder, "this is going to be more than just a club. It's going to be a legacy." Elijah smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "That's the goal," he said, "to build something that lasts. For all of us." As the first phase of Unity Heights neared completion, Elijah felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had ever experienced. But he knew the true test was still to come. Would the world embrace his vision? Would Unity Heights succeed in breaking down the barriers he had fought against his entire life? Only time would tell. But Elijah Daniels was ready for whatever came next. The personal stakes. As construction advanced, Elijah couldn't ignore the emotional weight of the project. Every detail of Unity Heights felt deeply personal, a direct response to the slights and struggles he had endured. Late at night, when the world was quiet, he would revisit the notebook that had birthed the idea. Flipping through its pages, he was reminded of the people who had inspired him, his parents, his mentors, and the countless individuals who had faced rejection simply because they didn't fit someone else's narrow definition of belonging. One page held a list of names. These were the people who had encouraged him, believed in him, and stood by him when the odds were stacked against him. His late mother's name was at the top. Next to it, Elijah had written, "For her sacrifices, for her dreams that I carry forward." Another page was darker, marked with words and phrases that had been used to belittle or exclude him over the years. Phrases like, "not a good fit," and "people like you." These words weren't just memories. They were fuel. Every line reinforced his commitment to making Unity Heights a success, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Tensions rise at Magnolia Ridge. Meanwhile, the tension at Magnolia Ridge was reaching a boiling point. The club's financial struggles were no longer a secret, and rumors about Unity Heights were spreading like wildfire. Members whispered about Elijah Daniels and his bold new venture, some with admiration, others with disdain. Charles Langston, however, dismissed the rumors publicly. Unity Heights might attract a certain kind of clientele, he said during a board meeting, his tone dripping with condescension. But it won't threaten our legacy. Magnolia Ridge is an institution. Despite his outward confidence, Charles was deeply uneasy. Membership renewals were down, and the club's exclusive image had started to work against it. Younger professionals and families were seeking more inclusive spaces, leaving Magnolia Ridge looking increasingly outdated. Charles's unease deepened when one of the club's longest-standing members, Arthur Beckett, announced his resignation. Arthur, a wealthy philanthropist and one of the club's biggest donors, had been courted by Elijah himself. "I believe in what Mr. Daniels is building," Arthur said during his resignation speech. "Unity Heights represents the future. It's a place where my grandchildren will feel proud to belong." Arthur's departure sent shockwaves through Magnolia Ridge. Losing a member of his stature was more than a financial blow. It was a symbolic one. Charles knew he needed to act, but he couldn't admit, even to himself, that Elijah Daniels had outmaneuvered him. The first challenge. For Elijah, progress wasn't without its challenges. As Unity Heights began to attract attention, it also drew criticism from those resistant to change. Anonymous emails and social media posts accused Elijah of trying to buy his way into history or playing the race card. Some critics questioned the financial viability of the project, claiming it was too idealistic to succeed. Elijah refused to let the negativity distract him. Instead, he focused on the people who believed in his vision. Camille, Marcus, and the rest of his team reminded him daily that the stakes were worth it. Still, the criticism weighed on him, especially when it came from people he had once considered allies. One evening, Elijah received a call from an old college friend, Greg, who worked in corporate finance. Greg had always been supportive of Elijah's career, but his tone during the call was cautious. "Elijah," Greg began, "you know I've always respected you, right? But I'm hearing things about Unity Heights. People are saying it's too ambitious, that you're putting your reputation on the line." Elijah took a deep breath before responding. "Greg, when has ambition ever been a bad thing? I'm not doing this for approval. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." Greg hesitated. "Just be careful, man. Not everyone's rooting for you." After the call, Elijah sat in silence, staring out at the city lights. Greg's words lingered, but they didn't shake his resolve. If anything, they reinforced his belief that Unity Heights was necessary. Change always met resistance. A spark of hope. As the months passed, Elijah's vision for Unity Heights began to take shape, both literally and figuratively. The clubhouse's modern structure now stood proudly against the skyline, its glass walls reflecting the progress it symbolized. The golf course, designed to be accessible yet challenging, was already drawing praise from early testers. Elijah's favorite part, however, was the community center. It featured classrooms, meeting spaces, and a technology lab where underprivileged youth could learn coding, engineering, and other skills. This, more than anything, embodied the heart of Unity Heights. It wasn't just a club, it was a catalyst for empowerment. One day, during a tour of the nearly completed facilities, Elijah met a young boy named Jamal. Jamal was part of the scholarship program Elijah had launched months earlier. The boy's eyes lit up as he explored the tech lab, marveling at the 3D printers and robotics kits. "This place is so cool," Jamal exclaimed, his enthusiasm contagious. "I want to build stuff like this when I grow up." Elijah knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You can, Jamal. And when you do, remember that places like this are meant for you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Jamal's wide grin stayed with Elijah long after the tour ended. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. A growing movement. Unity Heights was no longer just a project. It was a movement. Media outlets covered its progress extensively, praising it as a bold reimagining of what a country club could be. Social media buzzed with excitement, with hashtags like #UnityHeights and #NewTraditions trending for weeks. Celebrities, athletes, and thought leaders publicly voiced their support, further boosting the project's visibility. Marcus Bell's connections in the sports world brought in endorsements from top-tier golfers, while Camille's architectural designs were hailed as groundbreaking. Even the business world took notice. Several Fortune 500 companies reached out to Elijah, expressing interest in sponsoring events or partnering on community programs. Elijah welcomed these opportunities but remained focused on the core mission, creating a space that redefined what it meant to belong. Preparing for launch. As the grand opening of Unity Heights approached, Elijah felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was the culmination of months of planning, hard work, and relentless determination. But it was also just the beginning. Unity Heights wasn't just a club, it was a challenge to the status quo, a statement that exclusivity didn't have to mean exclusion. On the eve of the opening, Elijah stood on the clubhouse balcony, looking out over the illuminated grounds. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Camille joined him, a glass of champagne in hand. "We did it, Elijah," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Tomorrow, the world will see what we've built." Elijah smiled, raising his own glass. "Not just what we've built," he said, "what we've started." As they toasted under the stars, Elijah felt a deep sense of purpose. Unity Heights was more than a club, it was a promise. And tomorrow, that promise would come to life. The grand opening. The morning sun painted Unity Heights in golden light, illuminating the sprawling greens, the sleek clubhouse, and the gathering of excited guests. Elijah Daniels stood near the entrance, his tailored suit pristine, his tie a bold shade of crimson, a subtle reminder of the fire that had fueled this journey. Today wasn't just a celebration of Unity Heights, it was a statement to the world. As cars rolled in, a diverse crowd spilled onto the grounds. Entrepreneurs, community leaders, athletes, artists, and families mingled, their conversations carrying a buzz of anticipation. This was no ordinary country club crowd. Unity Heights had drawn people from all walks of life, united by a shared belief in inclusivity and progress. Elijah watched the scene unfold with a mix of pride and gratitude. Beside him stood Marcus Bell, the former NBA star turned philanthropist, and Camille Harrington, the architect whose designs had transformed Unity Heights into a masterpiece. "Look at this," Marcus said, gesturing to the crowd. "This is what change looks like, Eli. You've done something incredible." Elijah smiled, his gaze sweeping across the vibrant scene. "We've done something incredible," he corrected. "This couldn't have happened without you." Camille nodded, her eyes reflecting a rare mix of satisfaction and humility. "I've designed a lot of spaces in my career, but this feels different. It feels alive." The ribbon-cutting ceremony. The grand opening ceremony was set to begin, and guests were directed to a stage overlooking the golf course. Elijah stepped up to the microphone, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He scanned the crowd, seeing both familiar faces and strangers who had come to witness the birth of something new. "Good morning, everyone," Elijah began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Today marks the beginning of a dream that started not just with me, but with every person who dared to believe in something bigger. He paused, letting his words sink in. Unity Heights is more than a club. It's a place where doors are open, not closed, where tradition is built on values, not exclusion, where every person, no matter their background, feels they belong. The audience erupted into applause, and Elijah felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. But this isn't just about what we've built here today, he continued. It's about what we'll build together, connections, opportunities, and a legacy of inclusion. This is our chance to rewrite the rules and create something lasting. With that, Elijah held up a pair of oversized gold scissors and turned to the ribbon stretched across the clubhouse entrance. Marcus and Camille joined him, along with several scholarship recipients from the community program. Together, they cut the ribbon, and a cheer arose from the crowd. Unity Heights was officially open, a club like no other. The day unfolded in a series of events designed to showcase the unique spirit of Unity Heights. Guests explored the state-of-the-art facilities, from the expansive golf course to the tech lab and community center. A golf clinic hosted by a professional player drew both seasoned golfers and eager newcomers, while a panel discussion on leadership and inclusivity packed the clubhouse's conference room. At the tech lab, Elijah met a young girl named Alina, who was tinkering with a robotics kit. Her mother stood nearby, beaming with pride. "She's been obsessed with technology since she was 5, the mother explained. "We never thought we'd be able to afford something like this." Elijah crouched beside Alina, watching as she carefully assembled a robotic arm. "You're pretty good at this," he said, smiling. "What do you want to build next?" Alina looked up, her eyes sparkling. "A robot that can help people, like if they're sick or need a friend." Elijah's heart swelled. Moments like this were the essence of Unity Heights. A silent observer. Not everyone at the grand opening was there to celebrate. Charles Langston, the president of Magnolia Ridge, had arrived unannounced, his presence unnoticed by most. He stood at a distance, observing the festivities with a tight-lipped expression. Charles had told himself he was there out of curiosity, but deep down, he knew the real reason. The whispers about Unity Heights had become impossible to ignore, and the success of the club was a direct challenge to everything Magnolia Ridge stood for. As he watched the diverse crowd laughing and mingling, Charles couldn't deny the energy of the place. It was vibrant, alive in a way Magnolia Ridge hadn't been in years. The sight of Elijah Daniels on stage, commanding the admiration of so many, gnawed at Charles. It wasn't just jealousy, it was fear. He turned and left without speaking to anyone, his mind swirling with unease. The gala evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Unity Heights transformed into a dazzling venue for its inaugural gala. String lights illuminated the grounds, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Guests dined on gourmet cuisine, listened to live jazz, and celebrated the culmination of Elijah's vision. Elijah made his rounds, greeting guests and thanking them for their support. He paused when he saw Arthur Beckett, the philanthropist who had left Magnolia Ridge to join Unity Heights. Arthur raised his glass in a toast. "Elijah," Arthur said, his voice carrying the authority of a seasoned businessman, "what you've built here is nothing short of revolutionary. It's a privilege to be part of it." "Thank you, Arthur," Elijah replied. "But this is just the beginning." Arthur nodded, his expression serious. "You've set the bar high. Now the challenge is to keep it there." Elijah understood the weight of those words. Unity Heights wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. Sustaining it would require constant effort, innovation, and integrity. But as he looked around at the faces of people whose lives had already been touched by the club, he felt ready for the challenge. A personal moment. Late that night, as the gala wound down, Elijah found himself alone on the clubhouse balcony. The city skyline twinkled in the distance, and the hum of conversation and laughter drifted up from below. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to reflect. This wasn't just about proving Charles Langston or Magnolia Ridge wrong. It was about creating a legacy that transcended his own experiences. Unity Heights wasn't just his triumph. It was a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. As Elijah stood there, Camille joined him, a quiet smile on her face. "Long day," she said. "Long year," Elijah replied, his tone light but reflective. Camille leaned against the railing. "You know, this place is going to change lives." Elijah nodded. "That's the goal." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city lights. Then Camille spoke again, her voice filled with quiet pride. "You did it, Elijah." He turned to her, his gaze steady. "We did it. And this is just the beginning." As the last guests left and the lights of Unity Heights began to dim, Elijah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't the end of the journey. It was the start of a new chapter. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The ripple effect. The weeks following the grand opening of Unity Heights were a whirlwind of activity, excitement, and challenges. The club, already hailed as a groundbreaking success, was making headlines across the nation. News outlets praised its inclusivity, innovation, and the bold vision of its founder, Elijah Daniels. Membership applications poured in from individuals of all backgrounds: business leaders, educators, athletes, and artists, all eager to be part of something larger than themselves. For Elijah, the success was exhilarating but also overwhelming. Managing the rapid growth of Unity Heights required constant attention. Every day brought new opportunities and new hurdles. Yet, amidst the chaos, Elijah remained grounded, his vision clear. Unity Heights wasn't just a club, it was a platform for change, a community transformed. One of the most immediate and tangible impacts of Unity Heights was on the surrounding community. The construction of the club had already created jobs, but its opening brought even more opportunities. Local businesses thrived as members and visitors frequented nearby restaurants, shops, and services. The community center at Unity Heights became a hub of activity. Weekly workshops in coding, robotics, and financial literacy attracted children and adults alike. Elijah made it a point to visit the center often, taking the time to engage with participants and listen to their stories. One afternoon, he met Maria Torres, a single mother who had enrolled in the center's financial planning course. Maria worked 2 jobs and had always struggled to save money. But thanks to the program, she was learning how to manage her finances and set long-term goals. "Mr. Daniels," Maria said, her voice filled with emotion, "this place has given me hope. For the first time, I feel like I can build a better future for my daughter." Elijah smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Moments like these reminded him why he had taken on this monumental challenge. The media storm. As Unity Heights gained national attention, it also drew scrutiny. While many celebrated the club's mission, others criticized it. Some accused Elijah of using Unity Heights as a publicity stunt, questioning his motives and the club's long-term viability. The backlash didn't surprise Elijah, but it did frustrate him. One particularly scathing article accused Unity Heights of being too idealistic to sustain itself and implied that its focus on inclusivity diluted its prestige. The piece, published in a prominent business magazine, sparked heated debates on social media. Elijah addressed the criticism head-on. In an op-ed for the same magazine, he wrote, "Unity Heights is not about diluting prestige, it's about redefining it. Prestige should be measured by the impact we have on the world, not by the walls we build to keep others out. This is not just a club, it's a movement. And movements are meant to challenge the status quo." The article went viral, cementing Elijah's reputation as a visionary leader. Support for Unity Heights surged, and the club's waiting list grew even longer. The Magnolia Ridge response. The success of Unity Heights had not gone unnoticed at Magnolia Ridge. Charles Langston, the club's president, was growing increasingly agitated. Membership at Magnolia Ridge was declining steadily, and whispers about its outdated policies and exclusivity were becoming louder. During a tense board meeting, Charles attempted to rally the members. "We've survived decades of change," he declared. "Magnolia Ridge represents tradition, excellence, and heritage. We won't be overshadowed by a passing trend. But not everyone agreed. Some board members argued that the club needed to evolve if it wanted to remain relevant. The loss of high-profile members like Arthur Beckett had been a wake-up call, and the comparison to Unity Heights was unavoidable. Charles, one board member, said bluntly, "We're losing ground. Unity Heights is more than a club. It's a symbol, and if we don't adapt, we'll become obsolete." Charles dismissed the concerns, but the unease among the board was palpable. Magnolia Ridge was facing an identity crisis, and its future was uncertain. A symbol of hope. For Elijah, the pressure of leading Unity Heights was relentless, but he found strength in the stories of those whose lives were being changed by the club. One of those stories belonged to Jamal, the young boy he had met during the grand opening. Jamal had become a regular at the tech lab, his enthusiasm for robotics growing with each visit. One day, he proudly showed Elijah a prototype of a robot he had built, a small wheeled device equipped with sensors and a simple voice command system. "It's a helper robot," Jamal explained, his eyes shining. "It can carry things and even tell jokes." Elijah laughed, genuinely impressed. "Jamal, this is incredible. You've got a real talent." Jamal's mother, who stood nearby, wiped away tears. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels," she said. "Unity Heights has given my son opportunities I never thought possible." Jamal's story was just one of many. Unity Heights was becoming a beacon for individuals and families who had long been excluded from spaces like Magnolia Ridge. It wasn't just changing lives. It was changing perceptions. A reunion of sorts. One evening, Elijah received an unexpected email from Charles Langston. The tone was surprisingly cordial, and Charles proposed a meeting to discuss potential collaboration. Elijah was skeptical but curious. He agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant downtown. When they met, Charles was polite but guarded. He began with pleasantries, congratulating Elijah on Unity Heights' success. But as the conversation progressed, it became clear that Charles had an agenda. "I believe there's room for both our clubs to coexist," Charles said, his tone measured. "Perhaps we can find ways to align our missions." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Align our missions?" "Charles, with all due respect, Magnolia Ridge and Unity Heights stand for very different things." Charles's smile tightened. "Tradition and progress don't have to be at odds, Elijah. We could benefit from each other's strengths." Elijah leaned back in his chair, studying Charles. He could sense the underlying desperation in his proposal. Magnolia Ridge was struggling, and Charles saw Unity Heights as a threat, but also as a potential lifeline. "I appreciate the offer," Elijah said carefully. "But Unity Heights isn't just about building a successful club. It's about creating a new standard. I'm not sure that aligns with what Magnolia Ridge represents." Charles's expression faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Perhaps you'll reconsider in the future," he said, extending his hand. Elijah shook it but left the meeting feeling more determined than ever. Unity Heights wasn't just a response to Magnolia Ridge. It was a rejection of everything the old institution stood for, and he wasn't about to compromise that vision. The journey continues. As Unity Heights entered its next phase, Elijah reflected on how far it had come and how far it still had to go. The club was thriving, but its mission was far from complete. Every new member, every program, and every partnership brought new challenges and opportunities. Late one night, as he stood on the balcony of the clubhouse, Elijah looked out over the illuminated grounds. The journey had been exhausting, but it had also been deeply fulfilling. Unity Heights was more than he had ever imagined, and yet it still felt like just the beginning. Taking a deep breath, he made a silent promise to himself to keep pushing forward, to keep breaking barriers, and to ensure that Unity Heights lived up to its name. The power of partnerships. With Unity Heights thriving, Elijah knew the club needed to maintain its momentum. His vision extended far beyond the walls of the club. It was about creating a network of influence that reached communities, industries, and institutions. To achieve this, he sought out strategic partnerships that could amplify Unity Heights' impact. One of these partnerships was with STEM for All, a nonprofit organization dedicated to introducing underrepresented youth to science, technology, engineering, and math. Elijah invited their leadership to tour Unity Heights Tech Lab, where young minds like Jamal's were flourishing. "Your facility is remarkable," said Dr. Andrea Patel, the executive director of STEM for All, as she watched a group of teens working on a collaborative robotics project. "We'd love to collaborate. Perhaps a summer camp here at Unity Heights." Elijah nodded, already envisioning the possibilities. "Absolutely. Let's make this a place where young innovators feel empowered to dream big." The partnership led to a summer program that drew hundreds of students from across the state. It wasn't just about teaching skills. It was about instilling confidence and showing young people that they belonged in spaces of innovation and leadership. The turning point for Magnolia Ridge. Meanwhile, the cracks at Magnolia Ridge began to widen. Charles Langston's leadership came under scrutiny as membership continued to decline. The club, once a symbol of exclusivity, was now seen as a relic of an outdated era. Articles comparing Magnolia Ridge to Unity Heights painted an unflattering picture of the former. In an emergency board meeting, tensions reached a boiling point. "This is on you, Charles," said Mary Thompson, one of the younger board members. "You refuse to adapt. Now we're hemorrhaging members, and the community sees us as a symbol of exclusion." Charles bristled. "This club has stood for decades. We don't need to chase trends to remain relevant." Mary shot back. "It's not about trends. It's about values. Unity Heights is succeeding because it stands for something more than tradition. People want to be part of something meaningful." The room fell silent as the board members absorbed her words. Charles felt his grip on the club slipping, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. Instead, he doubled down, vowing to restore Magnolia Ridge's prestige, even as the board grew increasingly divided. A challenge from the past. As Unity Heights expanded its influence, Elijah faced a new challenge that threatened to undermine everything he had built. A former associate, Richard Hayes, who had been passed over for a key leadership role in Elijah's company years ago, resurfaced with a series of allegations. Richard claimed that Elijah had stolen his ideas for the community programs now thriving at Unity Heights. He threatened legal action and launched a smear campaign on social media, accusing Elijah of being a fraud. Elijah's team worked tirelessly to counter the claims, gathering evidence to prove that Unity Heights programs were entirely original. Camille and Marcus stood by him, publicly vouching for his integrity and commitment. "Elijah has always been a man of vision and integrity," Marcus said in a televised interview. "Unity Heights is a reflection of his heart and the hard work of everyone who believes in its mission. These baseless accusations won't diminish that." The support from his team and the community bolstered Elijah's resolve, but the ordeal took an emotional toll. Late one night, as he reviewed legal documents in his home office, Elijah felt the weight of the struggle pressing down on him. His phone buzzed, and he saw a text from Camille. "Don't let this distract you. Remember why you started." Elijah smiled faintly, her words rekindling his focus. The truth was on his side, and he wasn't about to let one man's bitterness derail his dream. Rising above the noise, Elijah decided to address the controversy head-on. At a press conference held in Unity Heights' Grand Atrium, he stood before a crowd of reporters and supporters, his calm demeanor masking the storm inside him. "These accusations are not just about me. They're about undermining a mission that is bigger than any one person," he began. Unity Heights was built on the foundation of inclusion, opportunity, and empowerment. That vision cannot and will not be shaken. He paused, his gaze steady. "To anyone who doubts the authenticity of what we've created here, I invite you to come and see it for yourself. Meet the people whose lives are being changed. Walk these grounds and feel the spirit of what we're building. The truth speaks for itself." The speech was met with applause and marked a turning point in the narrative. Support for Unity Heights surged, and Richard Hayes' campaign quickly lost steam. Elijah's ability to rise above the noise further solidified his reputation as a leader of integrity. A new era for Unity Heights. With the controversy behind him, Elijah turned his attention to the future. Unity Heights was already a beacon of change, but he knew there was more to be done. He announced plans to expand the club's mission with initiatives aimed at fostering entrepreneurship, mental health awareness, and environmental sustainability. The Entrepreneurship Initiative, named the Heights Accelerator, offered grants and mentorship to aspiring business owners from underrepresented backgrounds. The program's first cohort included a single mother launching an eco-friendly clothing line, a former teacher developing an educational app, and a young immigrant building a sustainable farming business. The Mental Health Initiative focused on creating safe spaces for members and the community to address stress, anxiety, and other challenges. Elijah partnered with leading psychologists and wellness experts to offer workshops, counseling, and mindfulness programs. Finally, Unity Heights committed to becoming a model of environmental stewardship. The golf course was redesigned to incorporate sustainable landscaping practices, and the clubhouse was equipped with solar panels and water-saving systems. These initiatives aren't just about growing Unity Heights, Elijah said at the announcement event. They're about growing people, ideas, and solutions for a better world. A private reflection. One evening, after a long day of meetings and events, Elijah found himself alone in the Unity Heights clubhouse. He walked through the halls, taking in the photographs that now adorned the walls, images of members and community members whose lives had been touched by the club. He paused in front of a photo of Jamal, now a confident teenager, presenting his robotics project at a national competition. Next to it was a photo of Maria Torres, smiling as she held up the keys to her first home. These were the moments that mattered most to Elijah. He stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against his face. The lights of the city twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond Unity Heights, a world still in need of change. Elijah closed his eyes, letting the silence wash over him. In his mind, he heard his father's voice. "Build your own table." He opened his eyes, a quiet smile on his face. Unity Heights wasn't just a table. It was a movement, a legacy, and a promise. And Elijah Daniels was just getting started. A rising tide of opposition. The success of Unity Heights had been meteoric, but with every rise comes resistance. As the club solidified its reputation as a beacon of inclusivity and innovation, detractors became more organized and vocal. Criticism moved beyond whispers in the media. It became a full-fledged campaign from those who felt threatened by what Unity Heights represented. Among the most vocal opponents were groups with ties to traditional country clubs, including some of the most exclusive institutions in the region. They accused Unity Heights of being a disruptive force, undermining the prestige of the club experience. Social media buzzed with debates, with some defending the values of Unity Heights and others calling it a trend that would fade. The backlash hit a boiling point when an anonymous group published a scathing expose targeting Elijah Daniels himself. They questioned his business practices, accusing him of using Unity Heights as a cover to build personal wealth. The article was filled with half-truths and insinuations, enough to stir public doubt. Elijah's phone rang off the hook as the story gained traction. Camille Harrington and Marcus Bell were the first to call, their voices filled with concern. "We need to respond immediately," Camille insisted. "This can't go unanswered." Marcus agreed. "People are going to be looking to you, Eli. You've got to show them who you really are." Elijah listened but took his time to act. He knew this wasn't just about defending himself. It was about protecting the mission of Unity Heights. Reacting rashly could do more harm than good. Instead, he gathered his closest advisors and strategized his next move. A transparent response. 2 days after the article was published, Elijah held a press conference at Unity Heights. Reporters crowded the atrium, eager for his response. Elijah stood at the podium, dressed in a simple suit that reflected his no-nonsense approach. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "I won't waste time addressing baseless accusations. Instead, I want to focus on what matters, the truth." Elijah went on to lay out a detailed report of Unity Heights' finances and operations. He revealed how every dollar of membership fees and donations was reinvested into the club's community programs, infrastructure, and sustainability initiatives. He also highlighted the partnerships and lives the club had positively impacted. "This isn't just a club," Elijah said, his voice steady. "It's a promise to create a space where every person, no matter their background, can belong. That's not a trend. That's a necessity." He paused, letting the room absorb his words. "I won't let falsehoods distract us from our mission. Unity Heights was built to challenge outdated norms and create something better. And we're just getting started." The press conference was a turning point. By choosing transparency and focusing on Unity Heights' achievements, Elijah disarmed his critics and rallied his supporters. The story quickly shifted from controversy to celebration, with media outlets praising Elijah's leadership. Unity Heights expands its reach. In the wake of the controversy, Unity Heights only grew stronger. Membership surged, and the waiting list stretched into the thousands. The success emboldened Elijah to take Unity Heights' mission beyond its walls. One of the first expansions was the launch of the Unity Network, a series of satellite programs in cities across the country. These programs brought Unity Heights values to underserved communities, offering mentorship, education, and networking opportunities. The flagship initiative of the Unity Network was the Future Leaders Fellowship, a program designed to support young entrepreneurs. Fellows received funding, mentorship, and access to Unity Heights resources to develop their ideas into thriving businesses. The program's first cohort included a diverse group of innovators, from a software developer creating accessible tech for people with disabilities to a chef launching a community-focused meal service. Elijah was personally involved in selecting the fellows, often spending hours reading applications and conducting interviews. He saw himself in many of the applicants, their determination, their hunger to make a difference. For Elijah, this was more than an expansion. It was a way to scale the impact of Unity Heights' mission. A familiar face returns. One evening, as Elijah worked late in his office, his assistant buzzed in with a surprising message. "Mr. Daniels, there's someone here to see you. He says he's an old acquaintance, Charles Langston." Elijah sat back in his chair, surprised but not entirely shocked. It had been months since their last encounter, and Elijah suspected that Magnolia Ridge's struggles had only deepened. "Send him in," Elijah said, his curiosity piqued. Charles entered, looking older and wearier than Elijah remembered. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his posture betrayed a sense of defeat. "Elijah," Charles began, extending a hand. "Thank you for seeing me." Elijah shook his hand, gesturing for him to sit. "To what do I owe the pleasure, Charles?" Charles hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I won't beat around the bush. Magnolia Ridge is in trouble. Membership is at an all-time low, and the board is fracturing. I've come to ask for your help." Elijah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Help? From me? That's unexpected." Charles shifted in his seat. "I've come to realize that we need to change. Magnolia Ridge has clung to traditions that no longer resonate with people. We need to evolve. And frankly, I don't know how to lead that change. But you do." For a moment, Elijah considered the irony of the situation. The same man who had dismissed him as unsuitable for Magnolia Ridge was now asking for his guidance. But Elijah's sense of purpose outweighed any desire for retribution. "What are you proposing?" Elijah asked, leaning forward. Charles took a deep breath. "A partnership. Magnolia Ridge needs to modernize, and I believe we can learn from what you've built here. I'm asking you to work with us, to help us transform." A defining decision. After the meeting, Elijah sat alone, contemplating Charles' proposal. On one hand, partnering with Magnolia Ridge could accelerate the kind of change Unity Heights stood for. On the other hand, aligning with a club that represented everything Unity Heights sought to challenge felt risky. Elijah sought advice from Camille and Marcus, as well as members of the Unity Heights community. Opinions were divided, but one message stood out. Whatever decision he made, it had to align with Unity Heights' core values. In the end, Elijah decided to meet with the Magnolia Ridge Board. He presented a bold vision for the club's future, one that involved overhauling its policies, diversifying its membership, and embedding community programs into its mission. He made it clear that this transformation would require more than cosmetic changes. It would require a cultural shift. The board was hesitant, but Elijah's reputation and the success of Unity Heights were undeniable. After weeks of negotiation, Magnolia Ridge agreed to adopt Elijah's proposed reforms, marking the beginning of a historic partnership, a new standard. The collaboration between Unity Heights and Magnolia Ridge sent shockwaves through the world of country clubs and beyond. It wasn't just about saving Magnolia Ridge. It was about setting a new standard for what these institutions could and should be. Elijah worked closely with Magnolia Ridge's leadership to implement the changes, ensuring they were more than surface level. The process was challenging, but it was also rewarding. For Elijah, it was proof that even the most entrenched traditions could evolve. As the partnership unfolded, Elijah realized that Unity Heights wasn't just a movement. It was a catalyst for change on a scale he hadn't imagined. The ripple effects were undeniable, reaching communities, industries, and institutions far beyond the walls of the club. And through it all, Elijah Daniels remained steadfast in his mission, to build a legacy that would stand the test of time. Unity Heights was no longer just a response to exclusion. It was a vision of what inclusion could achieve. A vision realized. 3 years had passed since the grand opening of Unity Heights, and the club was now an undeniable force for change. Its reputation had grown far beyond its original vision. What began as a challenge to traditional country clubs had evolved into a movement that touched industries, communities, and even global organizations. Unity Heights wasn't just a club, it had become a symbol. Its initiatives had sparked conversations about inclusivity in boardrooms, schools, and government halls. Elijah Daniels, once the ambitious entrepreneur looking for a seat at the table, was now a widely recognized leader advocating for a more equitable world. But Elijah wasn't one to rest on his laurels. He knew the danger of complacency. As he stood on the expansive balcony of Unity Heights, overlooking the thriving grounds below, his mind raced with ideas for the future. What came next? The Global Summit. One of Elijah's most ambitious undertakings was the launch of the Unity Global Summit, a gathering of leaders from around the world to discuss solutions to inequality, sustainability, and access to opportunity. Held at Unity Heights, the summit brought together business executives, educators, activists, and community leaders. The summit was a massive logistical challenge. Attendees ranged from Silicon Valley CEOs to educators working in underserved regions. Unity Heights facilities were transformed into spaces for panels, workshops, and keynotes, each designed to foster collaboration. Elijah's opening address was one of the most anticipated events of the summit. Standing on a stage illuminated by soft, golden light, he addressed the crowd with his characteristic calm confidence. "We are here today because we believe in the power of collaboration," he began. "The challenges we face, inequality, climate change, systemic barriers, are too great for any one individual or organization to tackle alone. But together, we can rewrite the narrative." He paused, scanning the room filled with eager faces. Unity Heights was built to challenge outdated norms and create something better. This summit is an extension of that vision. It's not just about what we can accomplish here, it's about what we can inspire beyond these walls. The speech was met with thunderous applause, setting the tone for 3 days of transformative discussions. Partnerships were formed, initiatives launched, and ideas shared. The Unity Global Summit became an annual event, further solidifying Unity Heights as a catalyst for global change. The Magnolia Ridge transformation. The partnership between Unity Heights and Magnolia Ridge was well underway, but the process was far from smooth. Elijah worked closely with the Magnolia Ridge Board to implement reforms, but resistance remained among some members who clung to the club's old ways. One such member was Henry Collier, an influential figure with decades of history at Magnolia Ridge. Henry had been one of the most vocal opponents of Elijah's involvement, often accusing him of dismantling tradition. During a particularly tense meeting, Henry confronted Elijah directly. "You think you can come in here and erase everything this club stands for?" he said, his tone sharp. "What gives you the right?" Elijah met Henry's gaze, his voice steady. "I'm not here to erase anything, Mr. Collier. I'm here to build something better. Tradition should inspire progress, not prevent it. If we hold on to the past too tightly, we risk losing the future." The room fell silent, and while Henry didn't respond, his expression softened ever so slightly. Over time, even the staunchest critics began to see the value of the changes. Magnolia Ridge's transformation became a model for other clubs facing similar challenges, proving that tradition and progress could coexist. A personal journey. While Elijah's professional achievements soared, his personal journey was equally profound. The challenges of leading Unity Heights have forced him to confront his own doubts and insecurities. Despite his outward confidence, Elijah often grappled with imposter syndrome, questioning whether he was truly equipped to lead such a monumental movement. One evening, Elijah visited the photo wall in the Unity Heights clubhouse. It had become a gallery of inspiration, showcasing the stories of members and community participants whose lives had been touched by the club. As he looked at the faces, young entrepreneurs, children from the scholarship program, and families who had found hope through Unity Heights, he felt a deep sense of purpose. "You built this," Camille said, approaching him. She had noticed his quiet reflection and joined him by the wall. "We built this," Elijah corrected, his voice tinged with emotion. "But sometimes I wonder if it's enough." Camille placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's more than enough. Look at what you've done, Elijah. You've given people a place to belong. That's everything." Her words stayed with him, grounding him in moments of doubt. They reminded him that leadership wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. The Jamal effect. Jamal, the boy who had once marveled at the robotics kits in Unity Heights Tech Lab, was now a teenager on the verge of greatness. He had become a star of the community program, winning national science competitions and mentoring younger students. One day, Jamal approached Elijah with a request. "Mr. Daniels, can I show you something?" Elijah followed Jamal to the tech lab, where the teenager unveiled a prototype of a drone designed to deliver medical supplies to remote areas. The device was sleek and functional, a testament to Jamal's ingenuity. "This is incredible, Jamal," Elijah said, genuinely impressed. "What's your plan for it?" Jamal hesitated, his excitement tempered by uncertainty. "I don't know. I don't have the resources to take it further." Elijah placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You let me worry about the resources. You focus on making this the best it can be." Jamal's project became the centerpiece of the club's entrepreneurship program, attracting funding from major investors. The success of Jamal's drone not only changed his life, but also became a source of pride for the entire Unity Heights community.